Hey everybody, Chris Chase here of the House of Common Show with a quick little intro for the segment that you're about to experience. Recently, we recorded a segment around Ravi Zacharias and all the things that have been going on because of his decisions and how it's affected other people. And we titled it The Abuse of Power.
And I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. Pardon my forwardness.
I first want to preface this by saying that by no means am I excusing the actions of RZIM or Ravi Zacharias. In no way am I siding with any kind of cover-up or justifying any kind of sexual misconduct, assault, whatever harassment or anything like that. I'm not justifying any of that.
Elevate ourselves, and again, I'm not in that position of power or have that understanding of what it's like to be Ravi Zacharias. But like I said, the thing that is actually more damning to the situation is the cover-up within the organizations, within these church ministries, within these parachurch organizations that then hides the fact and covers it up because we perpetuate the cycle.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to that power dynamic, that yeah, and it's the same thing with church in Chicago. Things are centered on one person. This one person has all the power, and this one person is so important, and God uses one person and all this stuff that like we put that person on the pedestal and we forget that men fall, women fall. Like we can't place people so high to that point where when they fall, like it crashes the whole world.
I think it's a farce, and I think it speaks to the issues of power that are referenced here, but then also we have all bucked up against in our different circles that we see in church history. We've cycled around this, and I think it's rooted in a poor theology, a poor understanding of scripture.
Yeah. So Hosky, just for the listeners that maybe adhere to that same theology that Cal is referencing, you want to lay down some of those.
Learn us, please.
You want to lay down some of those scriptures that you say you have ready.
Before we do that, can we change the word from theology to practice?
Theology. I mean specifically the understanding of God, the study of God.
No. I understand what you mean, but I think there's a difference between orthodoxy and orthopraxy.
Praxy.
Sure.
The practice of how we live this stuff out, the practice of theology, the practice of governance in churches,
Chris, right? Like when you have an idea of who God is, you have that.
Yeah, I would love to just allow me as host to kind of make it this
co-host,
to make it who's co-hosting with me. You?
I'm with you, man. I'm with you.
Who's co-hosting with me? You're here with a bunch of scrubs, yo.
Oh yeah, by the way, guys, this is my last show. I'm out of here after this.
This man low-key called the scrubs.
Yo, guys, where's O'Shea? Where's O'Shea?
Oh yeah, I did tell you O'Shea has a contract with Spotify. We're out, me and him, after this show. We're done. Just the understanding of there's the orthodoxy. And then there's the orthopraxy. And much of what we're talking about is the practice. It's the doing, is the practical part of it. So I just wanted to make that distinction so that I think there are some who would create a theology around this, but most of them are creating practices out of the theology that we practice around this, if that makes any sense. So I thought that was my quick little host interjection. Right back to Reem, who tossed the ball to Hosky.
Yeah, and I'll just share just two scriptures, just two, so that we're not, completely. Yeah, so Ephesians 5:11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. That's explicit. And then as it pertains to Ravi, as it pertains to Ravi specifically, as for those who persist in sin, rebuke them in the presence of all. It doesn't say in the presence of private. It says in the presence of all, so that the rest may stand in fear. So it, in a sense, you have this element of light exposing darkness, and this is the thing, is that it's not supposed to things do not in regards to the kingdom. I would just strongly challenge that theology, specifically that theology of dealing things in the shadows. I just think that has implications of of shame and guilt and all these things that fester in the shadows. So
and what you just said, Adam, is not exempt from grace, right? The grace still goes with those scriptures. It's still like we bring it out into the light, and that's where grace actually gets applied.
Absolutely. So I think, Cal, I heard it wrong. We're on the same page. At first, you got my blood going, man, because you're like, yo, it's false. And I was like, what the hell? Are we reading the same Bible?
I think it's just because everybody likes to jump on each other and not really listen to the end of things. So this usually happens. I say something and you're all like, no. And then at the end of it, you're like, oh, right.
That could have been such a great moment.
No.
That could have been such a great moment.
You could have left it alone
Cal,
and it would have been fine. But you doing that ruined everything. Now we're piling on you because of what you just did.
It's the power systems.
But Cal, you said, you specifically, and I was listening to you. This is what got me, is that you said, I can't remember the exact words that you said, but you said, I think blah, 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 blah. It's false. And that was where I was like,
blah, 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 blah.
The words you used to phrase it did sound like you were saying Adam.
What I said is I can understand where that comes from. So can we switch gears then and not just talk about
I thought Jason
the problem?
No, Jason went in. Jason went in.
You know what I'm saying?
He's been wanting it.
I mean, we going here, there. I'm good for it. I'm on to something else.
Jason, you have to bring it back in. You have to bring it back in.
I mean, there's not much else to say. I mean, the only thing else I can say is maybe one thing, and that's the fact that people don't understand. Whatever you do in the dark, it's always going to come to the light.
It must come out to the light.
And so, so Zechariah, he's gone, he's passed, but his actions have affected his organization. They've affected his staff. They've affected his family. And so as us as believers and Christians, we always have to understand, look, okay, what are we doing inside the dark? And trust me, nobody's perfect. I'm a full believer of grace. We all operate in grace, but it comes a point for us to realize, something that we almost never talk about in church is that there's still repercussions for sin. Sin is still sin. Like if you go out and get a woman pregnant, you still have to take care of that baby. So in other words, I mean, to me, it's sad for this whole story. I'm praying for the women and everyone else who's been involved or whatever. But to me, unfortunately, this is a sad reminder of the failures of man and how people in the church, as leaders, we should always live a certain lifestyle and strive for living in excellence. For instance, in the Bible, everybody talks about David, but people don't talk about Daniel. People don't talk about Joseph. Daniel had an excellent spirit. Everything Daniel did was good. Daniel was a man who walked up integrity and lived such a strong life. So he should be one of our top examples, Jesus and Daniel. That's it.
I would add this too, though, to that statement, Jason. People talk about David. They don't talk about David taking advantage of Bathsheba.
And murking his boyfriend.
You know what I'm saying?
Andrew did.
Right. Got him drunk.
You know what I'm saying?
What did you say?
Yeah, killing Uriah.
No, what I mean by that is that and I want to pivot to this right, like let's talk about those who are victims in this. And there's a long list of people, and I'm sickened by it, right? I'm saddened by it, because this is I'm not, and understand I'm not putting this on levels. This is right, but this is not, staff member and a person consensually deciding to break rules and break covenant. You know what I'm saying? This is different. This is somebody who broke the law. You know what I'm saying? This is somebody who broke the law and left victims in their wake. And they were treated as less than, they were sued. And this is not just something that happened in this organization. This is something that's happened to multiple victims in multiple spaces. And we have this weird thing. And it was alluded to in the conversation where, and it was Calvin who brought it up, where victim says something, and it's like, no, and we stand up for the leader. The leader is defended. The leader is backed up, and we're told. We've all had this conversation, man. Just live with integrity. God will vindicate.
And I'm about to cuss.
And here's the thing: there's truth to the statement. On one end, but on the other end, isn't integrity, like Adam said, to call things as they are? So where does the line draw between not saying anything because that's being a person of integrity, and allowing an organization, a person, a leader, leaders to destroy people's lives, and saying like, I'm not going to say anything about it because that's me being a person of integrity. Because there were, like, I would imagine that there are, it comes out that, we read in the article that there were people who ended up knowing about what had happened, who ended up knowing about it and ended up saying, we're going to sue these people. We're going to keep it to ourselves. We're going to, like, integrity is lost at that point. And so where does the line draw? Because there are people who are allowed to get hurt and be destroyed and who are no longer serving Jesus. And it's like, well, it was integrity. So I see in the chat, Andrew has a question. So go for it, Jonesy.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I was going to actually say something. Because where do we draw the line? Because all you guys are saying, there was abuse and we got to bring it to light and all this other stuff. I remember us having a conversation about a certain situation, about a few people that have brought things to light. And you guys were actually against that. But by your own admission to the words you're saying here, what they did rings true.
Talk it out.
So how do
The
you
situation.
How do you? I don't want to bring it up now.
Yeah,
Yo, type it in the chat. Type it in the chat.
Okay.
Fam.
I will. But in saying that, how do you guys then rectify that? Because you yourselves have just said by your own admission. I also wanted to bring up another thing, and this is a quick side thing. This is not to argue anything that was being said, but if any of you guys looked at the Miller report that they put out, forget about the news articles. The Miller
Is that
report,
the RZ?
the RZ,
that one?
yeah, the Miller report that they had an external independent company.
Yeah, I see it right here. Yeah.
The people that are high up, like his daughters and stuff, did not know, according to that report. So I don't know what the news articles versus the actual report is saying, but the actual report says that they did not know. So I think we got to be careful when we start to blame people when an actual independent report that shows everything. You guys got to read that report. It's crazy. It is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
It is wild.
It is. It's very sad. It's very sad.
Oh my gosh, guys, you got to read this report. It's a 12-page report. It's wild, but they do say that the upper staff did not know a clue.
So
of
who
what was
knew?
going on?
So who knew?
Yo, you knew, fam.
I didn't know. Fam. Don't blame that on me, fam. I knew nothing.
No.
I'm gonna get pulled in. This is on YouTube. This is on Spotify. This
nobody
is
knew. Nobody
I had
knew.
no idea, bro.
Nobody
I don't
else
be
knew.
holding on to it.
That was a poor
is,
joke. Poor joke.
according
My
to the
bad.
report-
My battery.
That's funny. The truth is, according to the report, no one knew except for Ravi the deep inner workings.
That's crazy.
And
that's
crazy.
the same sentiment that I got from
People inside the organization.
inside the organization.
Adam with
that,
the inside
literally-
scoop. Adam Hosky with the inside scoop from inside the.
So I think we got to be careful sometimes when we think, when we just read an article and say, okay, this is what has happened. When an independent investigative, law enforcement people that investigated it, they said over 50 people, whatever, investigated this and found this to be true. So I think we got to be careful there. But in saying that, you guys saw that who I'm talking about in the chat. You yourselves went across and said this. Now, by what you're saying in your own admission, that was actually okay, and you guys are actually wrong. I'm just asking a question.
I think.
Where do you guys?
I really want to know what this was.
I think that it's in the chat. So I think I'm not saying it's totally different. I think the difference, and I didn't.
Totally different.
It's
That's
very
what I mean.
different.
I think.
Not really.
Yeah, it is. I would say
it
it is. What I mean by that situation was like they brought a whole bunch of like they just crapped on him and then left. Like they didn't do
The stakes are different. Is what you're trying to say, Kareem.
yeah.
The stakes are different.
It wasn't there. They didn't do it necessarily for them to, or the perception is they didn't do it to bring about like to redeem the situation. They did it really just to
Plainly and simply, Andrew, those people who you were referring to were in a position of power themselves to then make their own way. The difference is when you are the victim, you do not have a position of power to then speak up to yourself, because the person who you are speaking against has so much more power. And it's even more egregious when that person then is an authority over you specifically. So I think that's where the difference is.
That would be the main difference for sure.
You know what though? I think in this type of situation, we really have to look at what the Bible says. And when you're talking about sexually involving people, for example, you have young girls now who are destroyed. They might never be married. I mean, they might never, want a real relationship or that. I mean, so this just is not affecting just them. It's affecting, if there's a lineage or whatever. I mean, so I think that's when you have to pull the trigger when you're talking about certain types of abuse, obviously financially, but I mean, it's financial, it's case by case. Like, all right, is it $10? Is it $1,000? But I mean, there's so much that we could talk about or discuss about, like, when do we, call out and say, all right, this is wrong.
So the question for you, Andrew, in regards to that situation with, you said you read the report. So nobody knew, but somebody was saying that in the article that there was somebody that came to them and then they sued them. When did that happen?
What had happened was in 2017.
Yeah.
A couple from Ontario came and sued them. Sued Ravi for saying he coerced her into sending him explicit texts, sexting pictures, all that other stuff. And so it was a couple. And so they had a whole fight. There was an argument. He sued them. They sued him. What was also found out, which we don't know if it's still true or not, but what we found out, though, is that they had also another issue with another church and another church leader from another church, because that's what one of the articles that was sent to us even said. So you have that issue there as well, right? Of them being involved with another church with another scandal. And so anyways, it turned out that they had to sign an NDA. All this problem arose. They kept it quiet. Well, after all the rest of this came out, then this investigation opened up, and the people at the top said, okay, we're going to open this investigation to all of that.
So the people at the top knew about that NDA from before, though, 2017?
I don't know if they knew about the NDA, but they knew about the situation.
They knew about
I don't know how many people knew about the NDA. And the articles don't really say who all knew about the NDA of that.
But at that time, they just took Ravi's
Yes, they did. But it's no different. Okay, but in that argument, it's no different than any of us getting a charge, and we're saying that's not true, and then everyone's believing us, right? If you're hoping your guy is faithful,
I'm gonna have your back.
You're gonna have their back,
especially you, Jonesy. If
right?
somebody said something negative about you, Jonesy.
You guys are fools.
No.
For
don't bring him into this.
Don't bring me into nothing.
Don't put that evil on me. Don't put that evil on me.
On your own.
I retract that statement. I retract. No. I'm not on that either. I'm out.
What's happening in Ajax, man?
Yo, Oshawa Center, stand up.
Don't put cities on there. Don't put cities in the chat.
Don't put cities. We're done.
He means Ajax.
Belleville.
Ajax Football Club. Ajax Football Club.
You've been going to.
No. Beep. No, but
no hypotheticals.
No. But like the idea of like there are people in various spaces. And I like the distinction that happened between the conversation that like Andrew said, which is true, and the conversation that Bart said, in the idea that, the idea of, and this is where I come to the beginning, the idea of power. When you have the power, you have the ability to block the victim. You have power, you have the ability to tell the victim no. The reality is, if you've done something and you have nothing to hide, really you should say, investigate me. Go ahead, investigate me. If you've done nothing, you should be able to. Like, no, like should be able to say, listen, go for it. Here are the papers. Here, bring it to the light. Go for it.
And how do you
I don't know. I'm just saying these things, Brian. Let me say my things. Let me get my thought out.
Okay.
Let me get my thought out. Just let me get my thought out. But the idea of like I'm just heartbroken for these staff members and these women these family members who said that this is what happened to me, and were told no, it's not important, and they were told to be silent. And we know among us on this show, we know people who might not have been in similar situations like these ones with this individual, but have been in positions where they have been abused, and they have been told, just stay silent and let the Lord be your redemption. Just be silent, sign the NDA, these people who are the abusers are allowed in various spaces to continue to abuse. And listen, what happened with this ministry organization, with this person, is not singular. This happens in various spaces. This happens with various leaders across North America, across the world. This is not just singular to North America. This is not singular to churches. This happens in office buildings, in companies, all over the place, where the power shifts and people are not able to stand up for themselves. Coincidentally, on the flip side, we live in a cancel culture society, and so like if you stand up for yourself, like all this sort of stuff, it's just so gross and so broken. And meanwhile, there are people who are legitimately hurt and they have no place to go with their story. And I'm weirded out by the whole thing, because ultimately I care more about the victim than I care about who this guy is. I care more about those people who have been hurt and who have been told, yeah, your story is not real, because they have more risk. The person who says, I have said something, has more risk on their lives because they're risking everything.
Yeah,
and it's in the chat. It's in the chat. The idea of systemic. We talk about systemic racism all the time, right? This systemic power shift is real too.
Yeah,
it's not individual. There's systems in place to allow these sort of things to continue. And what happens is, and you see this with other spaces, you do it here, sit on the bench for a little while, go somewhere else to do it all over again. Somewhere else, go do it all over again, over and over and over again. Bart, you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to, this is adding on directly to what you were saying, and it's something Stefan had brought up about the power in these places. And I would just, remind the listeners, the viewers, that as believers, we are called to actually advocate for victims, for people who are in the margins, for those who are hurting, for those who are the outcast and downcast. And as somebody who has worked vocationally in church, and the same thing with you guys, it's always hurts when you hear stories like this, because it's like you spent all your effort, the organizations, right? I'm not talking about specifically RZIM, but the organization, the entity spent all their effort protecting the guy, the person, the company man, and not the person who the Bible says who your attention should be on. And that's the greater sin.
Well, it's less of protecting the guy, and it's more of protecting their interest in staying alive.
Yeah.
It's a survival instinct. It's a survival tactic. It's an organizational survival tactic. And that's what they're doing. And so in protecting the guy, they're protecting their own capital. They're protecting their own interests. They're protecting their reputation. They're protecting the future of their livelihood instead of looking out for the victim.
That's what I quickly want to speak to in terms of, the statement was made in the chat, systemic issues, and then Chase spoke to it. Really, the reality is the system in way it's set up, where we build up individuals, is it is faulty, where it allows for this type of thing to happen. So within the system itself, when it's built up in a way where we need this guy to be looked at in a positive light, and if we don't keep them in positive light, that could actually tear down the actual system itself, or the organization itself, is why I think at first, when situations happen, there is that thought process of, do we really want to? And yes, we know what a lot of people know what they should do, but the reality is, they know if they tear down this individual, there might be repercussions that they may not be able to get get out of. And that's where the rubber, meets, that whole saying. For a lot of people, are they putting their hope in the individual, or are they putting, and we're talking about the church, or are they putting it in the Lord or God? And we know we love to say that, but like, how many of us, when that situation arises, how many people are willing to say, no, I'm just gonna do the right thing? And the other thing I'll say is a lot of them don't even want to believe that it could, because they don't even want to allow themselves to go there, because they know what may happen if they allow themselves to go there. So a lot of times great people will say, and it might even happen with this Ravi situation, great people like that love God with everything, they don't even want to allow their minds to go to the possibility of that. Why? Because they know the repercussions of if they allow themselves, and if it happens to be true, where this can go.
Because celebrity is the new monarchy.
100%.
Yeah.
And I agree, but let's even take it down from the celebrity down to maybe even our own levels.
100%.
And it's
Go for it, Jonesy.
It's
Yeah.
the same
Dude,
thing,
we're
but
famous.
it's the same thing, but it's a little bit murky in even what we're saying, because in some of the dealings with different people, there's different people even around this group where we've had different interactions with the same leadership. And some of us have been screwed over with the same leadership, while other of us have been blessed with the same leadership. So then how do you draw the lines there? Because there's been some of us, even in the same circle, who have had different people who we've worked with or maybe have connected with who have screwed us over majorly. But for others, they've been nice. So
Make it plain. Come on.
So how do you rectify that? No, because I'm not.
Jonesy's not the one to drop names.
No, I'm not saying.
do that.
I'm saying he's preaching. I'm saying, come on, brother, make it plain, brother.
You have to pull the hanky out when you do that part.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Shana.
it's great that we're saying all this stuff, but when the rubber hits the road, like how does it all play out?
Facts.
Do we throw those people under the bus because they've been nice to one person, but they screwed over another person?
Mm-hmm. And I think to that end,
Uber rating.
Okay, let's break it down. Let's break it down to power. Let's not make it about relationships or entanglements, that sort of thing.
Entanglement.
Jonesy was preaching better than we were shouting. That's for sure.
So let's not make it about entanglements. Let's make it about power. I think there's one thing, and we've known this. There's one thing if a boss, a staff member, they don't get along, and there's a broken up relationship on that end, right? And we've seen that.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference, and I think Jonesy, you would agree with this. The difference when we see it as a pattern, where multiple people are saying the same thing about a leader.
Yeah,
because we've all had it, but we've worked with somebody. It's kind of like this is not working.
But even in saying that, there's some leaders that we've encountered where maybe 2 or 3 people got screwed, but then the other 4 or 5 didn't.
And so we
there's
have
still
to
a pattern.
Yes,
but it's not. You know what I mean?
And like Uber, you have to wear your own rating. So if let's say somebody has a pattern of maybe 4 or 5 things have happened and it's not been very favorable, I think it's still better for the whole for that to be like, listen, nobody's perfect. We understand that. And there are always going to be shortcomings when humans are involved. But at the same time, this is what happened. And you got to be aware of that before going into it. It's the same thing that people do with like Glassdoor before you go hire at another job. People check out the reviews were about the management there. So I think it's to me it's like an Uber rating, like you rate me, I rate you, to kind of keep everybody in check.
and to allow yourself to have those questions asked of you. And I think that's when we come back to this idea of power and victimness, that sort of thing, where. So say we break it down to somebody going to a job where they know this person has been a dick at different points in as a leader. To allow somebody to say, "Here's what I've heard about you. Can you speak to that?" Again. So the problem is not only that people can people not ask questions, you also have leaders who are then going to know how to slickly move around that and not answer it. So you have this weird thing where, like, if people were just honest, which is so weird to think of, especially in what we do. People are just willing to be honest and say, listen, like, I know that I'm a micromanager, and I can be really annoying about certain things, and I'm working on that. And the person coming in can say, "This is who I am," and there's a willingness to work together. But if not, then you walk into places, and this is the adage of somebody dating somebody, and they go, "Oh, I think I can change them. It'll be different with me."
Mm-hmm.
It'll be different with me. They were abusive to them, but they're not going to be abusive to me. And then you realize that, like, it's only we talk about the pit mentality. They're kind to you for a little bit, and then they trick you, and then you're on the bottom. You know what I'm saying? Like doing whatever they want because you've just been played, because you thought it would be different. And I guess I'm just sick and tired of seeing that happen in our house. Not the House of Common, not my house, not your house, but in terms of the where we live, what we do, this thing that we are part of. I'm so sick and tired of seeing that happen to people. It's just ridiculous, because like it shouldn't be happening among us, and it does more often than not. And it's coming out, especially now. People have cell phones, they have blogs, all sorts of stuff like that. It happens more often.
But is that just how our structure is? And maybe I'm gonna wade into the weeds a little too much, but does our structure allow for people to be like that and be protected?
Protected it. Oh, my personal opinion, in some spaces, because not every organization is the same, not every structure is the same.
Hierarchy.
Not every hierarchy is the same. But I think we're seeing that in a number of different spaces, it is set up to allow that. That's what I mean by the systemic thing.
Yeah, because they tell the story of Miriam speaking against Moses and Saul and David in the cave and don't touch the Lord's anointed, and right, like we see that, right? And even specifically organizationally, when legal lines are crossed and things need to happen for justice to be very prevalent, it's like you can't even go the legal route. Don't get a lawyer. Don't talk about what's happening. Don't defend yourself. Just pray about it, and hopefully in the next season of your life, the Lord will take care of you. And if not in this life, then the next. So yes, our system is built poorly to protect poorly able or enable people in these areas. Dysfunctional people who hurt people.
But I think like if you're gonna submit to that, then that's cool. But I tell people, listen, you gotta be able to think outside of the structure that we work in, right? Like only these things happen in this circle, the church circle. Any other organization, like quote unquote professional organization, it wouldn't go on the way it goes on here, right?
Going HR.
Yeah, but when you're talking about people who
go HR,
yeah. But yes, Stefan, I agree 100%. But when you're speaking to people who explicitly work in this environment, if they do what they need to do to advocate for themselves, their hiring ability, or however you say it, their ability to be hired is hindered, and they have to go on an exodus and go outside of the family. So you see, they can't go to the street, to the church down the street. They can't go to another district or in another province. Like they are tarnished and tainted, and they doing what they needed to do as a victim to be vindicated is a strike against them, and they are disabled from actually doing what they feel purposed to do, because not of the church system that they were in, but the denominational system that surrounds that church system that enables poor leadership. So there's levels to it,
and be not deceived that, like, especially in this circle of churches, that like hiring leaders talk to hiring leaders, you know what I mean? And there are circles we have, like, if we are a circle in terms of people who have work, who work in a church, there are also circles of people who run churches, you know what I mean, who sit in power in these places. And Cal, to your point, man, it's just crazy, because then when you advocate for yourself and you begin to actually talk about these issues, you're seen, it's not even, oh, he stood up for himself. It's seen as, oh, you're disloyal. You're
divisive. Yeah.
You're divisive. You know what I mean? And so they start to label it, especially in the terms that I guess people within this circle would understand as almost cancerous, as though like you
Right.
don't want this person as a part of your organization because they're going to cause division and they're not loyal to you and they'll go wherever, you know what I mean? And so, all those things come into play.
And it's because
I'm-
they're exposed.
I'm here for the
their
check.
inabilities are exposed.
So the
right?
question,
Like, their brokenness is exposed.
yeah. So then the question I want to ask you guys is, so what would we have to do to the existing system to to eliminate those issues that we have?
If a bonnet
Shatter it and fire.
No,
Beer
I
fire.
Finally, Stefan can say get strapped up.
It's time to strap it up. It's time for like it
Strap
has
up.
to.
Now strap it up.
Well, yes. Pause.
Oh, Lord of mercy.
The whole thing needs to be burnt down. I think the people who perpetuate the system need to be called out. In Bainwort, if this is the Dark Knight Rises, drag them into the courts and have
Have them walk on the ice.
Oh, come on, bro.
It's like I think they need to listen.
That was for Adam.
To be
That was
very
good.
honest, because
That
I
was
think
good,
everybody
Chris.
in this group can name one or two names of people who have done wrong by them. And
But
I
we're
think
also assuming that everyone here is perfect, right? You're ready to walk on the ice too, right?
I'll walk on the ice, but I know
You
Batman's
go
gonna
for it,
save
go
me.
for it, go for it.
Stefan, you know you
Save
dead
you.
while they walking on the ice.
Yeah, bro. You still don't know how to swim, fam. You still don't know how to swim.
Stefan, we have the edited edited parts of the show. You're not walking on no ice, fam.
Nah,
You're not walking on no ice, fam. Nah, dude. Nah,
But
dog.
Stefan run into the courtroom
but
with a gun.
No, the reason why I say that, like Steph, like
That's a good question. That's a good question, Reem.
No, I hear what you're saying, but like we can complain, but then
No, it's not.
if we don't provide some sort of solution from what we can control, then it's
well, I think
like
that
and
that-
to
that's
say
where,
bun it
like,
down
that-
is
ultimately
one
that's where
thing.
it starts.
No,
To
but no,
bun
I
it
think
down is one thing, but what does that really mean? Bun it down to what?
Babylon
No,
system.
I think me
What?
Reem, I
Fire
think that the like having nobody is willing to have conversations like what we're having, like in front of people. These are all conversations that we have. Like we're at youth camp, and then it's Thursday night, and there's 5 youth
Getting
pastors sitting
cookie.
around, and they have this quiet conversation, or it's like over lunch because somebody's going through something really rough. Jones, you've been there in my life. We've been there. We've all been there for one another in different spots like that. Where like something's going rough in your life, and so we're having this quiet conversation, but we're looking around back and forth to make sure that there's not a possible person from the church who's kind of like listening in. It's
Right.
having these sort of conversations out in the open and our conversation is not perfect. We're flawed human beings. We have
100%.
we have flawed arguments, and we argue with each other, and then we agree
Listen,
with
we have to
disagree.
reset this conversation 3 times.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so we're not perfect in it, but like the willingness to actually say, this is not okay out loud,
Right.
publicly, on record, to say like we as a collection of, we might not agree with how we get there, but we agree that the system as it's presented is not okay because it's protecting the wrong people. I think that's a start. I think if you burn it down without having the conversations beforehand, then all you're doing is removing one dictatorship and replacing it with another one. You're leaving a power vacuum for someone else to kind of
that's
walk
exactly
in.
what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
So you like and the problem too is like we also got to think outside of ourselves. What about the next generation coming up? What can we do to try to move the needle towards where it's better for those coming up? So we can complain, but then what are we doing to try to help this situation? And so for me, one of the things that I would say is that I know financially it's not feasible, but if there was, for most churches, but something along the lines of like HR, like somebody made the comment that you couldn't do this in a regular in the secular work situation. A part of that's because they have certain HR policies and procedures.
But how could you have HR,
That's what
Kareem? How could you have?
I'm saying
how could you have
not.
Let him finish.
Let me finish. I'm saying I don't. I'm saying obviously we can't, but then what can you learn from what they do there, and actually try to implement those things within the church itself?
Okay, let me.
And I know you have HR, Adam. You're the
I was
one
gonna
out
say-
of all of us.
Yeah.
No,
I've had
and
HR in multiple churches.
Yeah, like I personally don't think that HR is the solution, because I think when you understand what HR is not empowered by the people. HR is empowered by those that are in power to keep status quo and to manage employees and whatnot. And it's not to say that every HR department is bad. I'm not even saying that any HR department is intrinsically bad, but they protect the interests of the organization at play. But what I am saying is that, like, I think, and I just want to backtrack a little bit. Like, I think it's important to know that like to burn it down is not the solution, because then we haven't learned from our history. We have not learned from the Reformation. We have not learned from every denominational split, every church split, and all these kinds of things. We have not learned just to say, well, then let's burn it down and start something new, because then the oppressed become the oppressors.
That's right. I'm just
What?
Let the man finish, bro.
Stefan, go to bed, fam.
Yo, Stefan wants them guns in them streets. Yo, Stefan belongs to the streets for real. Stefan belongs to the streets.
Not walking on no damn ice, man.
Go, Adam.
Go ahead,
Expose
Adam.
yourself. No, it's just simply that. It's just that we just haven't learned, to say burn it down. I know we say that in jest, but
It's in jest. Yeah.
I know, I understand that, and I'm not coming at you, Cal, specifically.
Better
but I'm
not.
just saying.
But thank you.
I'm
I'll give
also
it to
I also though want to bring a little friction here in saying that.
Really, Andrew? You do?
No.
No.
Why not?
Oh
Why
my
not?
gosh!
Bring that.
Seriously?
I
Really?
see the
Really?
Lord.
Bring it. Bring that 60
and not
grit.
not in a bad way, but I think also because someone, I forgot which one of you guys said, because we aren't perfect and we do make mistakes. I think we've got to also understand when it's actual abuse and
Yes.
when we have
Yes.
to actually just be quiet and leave.
Right.
Because there
Yep.
are times where we just need to be quiet and leave. Not every single situation is abuse. It could be just difference of opinion of this person's running the church this way. I don't like the way this church is being run.
Yeah,
And
different
I wanna
philosophy of
walk a
ministry.
different-
and-
Exactly.
Yeah,
But
and that's
but
maturity.
nobody-
That's maturity. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Sorry,
won't
sorry,
say
No,
go
no,
ahead.
and I'm not
But-
saying that we are
yeah.
doing that, but what can happen is it can quickly turn to
Yes.
everything
yes.
that has happened to me is abuse. And it's
Right.
like, not everything that has happened to you is abuse. If you're getting fired from 7 different places, maybe just look at yourself for a little bit first and do an evaluation, because it could be that it's your issue and not theirs.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, let's just be careful that we're not categorizing everything as abuse and being hit by abuse all the time.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think that most people wouldn't categorize abuse if in something things that aren't abuse as abuse, right? We do understand in a cancel culture world, everybody's got sunburn and super sensitive, and they take offense, and mostly because their projections are being shattered, right? There are those that will cry wolf, but for the most part, right? And this is where you get into the church to thread, is when people speak and they just say, hey, here's my very honest experience, and it was abusive, and then we say, well, you should go pray about it and see, like, what did you add to the conversation? What's the common denominator here, right? We then perpetuate
Yes.
the broken system that has failed them.
Yes. And
I
the
think-
system is broken. I don't disagree with you guys on that. I'm just saying,
That was
Yeah, but-
friction, Andrew. You've added more friction than that, my friend.
Yes.
You've added more friction than that. I'm like, no, that's actually, I rate that. I rate that, Andrew. I rate that. That's actually really good.
I think the probably where the root of these issues stem from is the fact that even from leadership themselves that are in these leadership roles, there is this idea that they have to be perfect. So they got to even
Right.
convince themselves
Yeah.
that they got to be perfect. And so, for talking solutions, I don't know how we pragmatically do it, but leaders got to start realizing that you don't have to be perfect, because really and truly, like, for some of those people that went, like Chase, you made the statement, like, be honest with themselves. They don't think that they can't even allow themselves again to be honest that, yeah, I am a micromanager, that I do this. Because I treat my staff great. Like, if you talk to a lot of the leaders that I think some of us are referencing, if you talk to them on the one-on-one and you bring up some of the things that have been said, they have their own way of saying, no, that's not me. That's just their perception. And I actually think that they believe that. Like, they wholeheartedly believe that they don't have these issues within their character. Why? Because they can't allow themselves to go there. They need to be perfect.
So then let me say this. It's it's one of those things that, okay, we can't burn it all down because we will just be left in the same situation that we are in at this moment. The reality is, though, it's like I remember sitting down with someone and we were talking about the whole idea of the church. And Jesus at Caesarea Philippi basically says, and I will build my church. And it's something that what we find ourselves articulating without explicitly saying it is we have a lot of the prevalent, not all, but some of the prevalent pastors that are running through each and every one of our minds. They themselves, as much as they would look at Jesus as king, and would think that Kanye West's latest album is like the most wonderful thing, they would look at it and they would go, but I have built this church. I have maintained this church. And so they are doing everything that they feel is necessary to protect the church that they feel is under their authority. We will use the term itself. And I would say what ends up happening is for them, and I would say for all of us, is that we first have to realize that, you know what, it isn't our job to build this church. It isn't our job to protect this church. That at the end of the day, that we are actually coming under Jesus. And trust me, when I say that, it's like, looking at you, Calvin, right now, it's like I know that itself can open up a whole plethora of like issues itself, especially if we are dealing with someone that is borderline high functioning psychopath. It's one of those things that itself is always the tension of it. But then I would say we like to speak of vulnerability a lot from the pulpit or from our Instagram stories and our Instagram lives, but when it actually counts, we aren't willing to take that step. We are more than happy to raise the bar and then turn to someone else and be like, okay, jump. Meanwhile, it's like we are not willing to showcase our failures of trying to clear the bar that we have set. And what ends up happening is that in the midst of everything, for how we ourselves are operating and how we ourselves approach how we operate as a church, the body of Christ, it's one of those things that we just have to change how we do things. And at the end of the day, we also have to be prepared that, you know what, how we are doing things right now has attracted a certain type of person, a certain type of people. And a lot of the times we are more interested in preserving the system because we don't want to lose the people that are there. We don't want to lose the dollars. And it's one of those things that it's like Bart's eyes are like ridiculous, but it's one of those things that when a lot of things are said and done, our system is built in such a way that we have buildings, that we have bills to pay, and if we were to begin to change how we operate, there is the reality that we may not be able to meet those bills. That we may not be able to pay our staff, that we may not be able to pay ourselves. Because for a lot of these people that are in positions of authority, all they've ever done is be a leader of a church. And so it's something that they will do everything in their ability to secure that bag because they have no other way to look after their family and everything else along that lines. But I'm done.
Jeez, Matt, please
keep on going though. Keep it moving for the family.
For the kids.
A mutual friend of mine and Andrew Jones,
Savage 21.
No, Jeremy Duncan. You remember that name, Jonesy? Jeremy Duncan. He wrote this tweet out in the midst of all these things going on about Rabbi Zachariah. He said this: if you're a pastor and you can't stop yourself from acting inappropriately around other people, the answer is not the Billy Graham rule. The answer is to quit your job and get counseling.
What's the Billy Graham rule?
The Billy Graham rule is to never be at least if you're a man, never ever be alone with a woman. Never be alone with somebody opposite sex, that sort of thing. And he's like, if you can't stop yourself from acting inappropriately around somebody of the opposite sex, the answer is not the Billy Graham rule. The answer is to quit your job,
help, man,
and get counseling.
That's true.
You need help.
You're solving the symptom, not the actual issue.
And I think that's a great place to land. That we need to be people who are checking our. I hate to use the euphemism by Das Effects, but check yourself before you wreck yourself. Also, it was a Das Effects line before it was an Ice Cube line, before it was appropriated by everybody else. Das Effects came up with it first. Shout out to Jersey. This has been a long conversation, but a necessary conversation. Tim, your mic is too damn loud. This has been the House of Common Show. Well, friends, thank you once again for tuning into the House of Common Show. Remember, you can find us right here on YouTube. Just simply search the words House of Common Show, and then remember to like and share every single video that you watch, and then subscribe to the channel so you can be up to date on whenever we are dropping brand new segments, brand new episodes, and brand new updates for your viewing pleasure. This has been the House of Common Show.